Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Perez Art Museum, Miami. My name is Marie Vickles. I'm the Director of Education, and thank you for joining us for our Local Views at PAMM program with artist Gesi Schilling. Our virtual Local Views program is presented with the generous support of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation and features Miami-based artists sharing their practice and discussing works of art from PAMM's exhibition programs that connect in various ways to their own work. As a 21st century museum dedicated to representing the people and communities of South Florida, the Perez Art Museum Miami strives to be a leader in the presentation, study, interpretation, and care of international and modern and contemporary art, while representing and cherishing the unique diversity of Miami-Dade. Through our exhibitions and programs, we aim to encourage everyone to see art as an incentive for genuine human interaction. Tonight, I'm so happy to introduce Gesi Schilling, a Miami-based photographer capturing beauty in the everyday moments of life. I had the pleasure of first getting to know her and her work during one of our museum's free second Saturdays back in 2014, when she poetically captured the beautiful art, dance, and community engagement presented by the artist collective Omni Zona Franca. Before I introduce Gesi, I would like to acknowledge and thank the incredible team of people that are putting in the hard work to make these programs come together online. Big thank yous go out to Anita Bram, Associate Director of Adult Programs and Community Engagement, and our world-class AV team, Denise Faxis and Andrew Bird. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you. Let's get started. Gesi is a Miami-based photographer whose work examines critical junctures in the human experience. Gesi has photographed for various publications, including the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Wall Street Journal, Complex, Vogue, and the Miami Herald, where she began her career in photojournalism in 2010. Gesi created the Sunny Project, a photo print sale that raised funds for local nonprofits supporting vulnerable populations during the pandemic, and co-curated an accompanying exhibition entitled Sun Pours Day Long. She has documented more than 200 weddings and a decade of the O Miami Poetry Festival, with whom she is currently collaborating on a project entitled Remembrance to Order, a collection of poems and photographs honoring Miami-Dade residents who died as a result of the pandemic. This work has influenced her most recent personal project, an exploration of the end of life. Gesi is self-taught and holds a degree in visual anthropology from the University of Florida. As you watch along this evening on Facebook or YouTube Live, please post questions for Gesi in the comments section. She will try to answer as many as possible in the Q&A portion of this evening's presentation. And remember, if you value this and other programs presented by the museum, please consider supporting us by going to pam.org/donate. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Gesi Schilling to Local Views at PAMM.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Marie. And thank you, Pam, and in particular, Anita Bram, for inviting me to be a part of the Local Views program. It's an honor to be here. I've watched a number of local artists speak about their practice here and encourage anyone listening now who hasn't listened to other Local Views to go and dig into Pam's YouTube archives. There are so many remarkable Miami-based or Miami-related artists that have shared their work and ideas here, and each Local View is just a treasure trove. So yes, my name is Gesi Schilling and I'm a photographer. I was born here in Miami and grew up just slightly north in Hollywood. And before I talk to you about some of my recent work, I want to share a bit about my background and tell you how I came to be a photographer. So though I've always wanted to take pictures, my formal training is not in photography. I studied visual anthropology, as Marie said, at the University of Florida. And so I was often working indirectly with photos and film in my studies. And in my final year of school, I interned at a photojournalism magazine in London and wrote a paper comparing photojournalism and contemporary ethnography. And I interviewed a number of world famous photojournalists and When I would talk to them, I would often find myself dreaming of one day retiring into photography. And I came back to Miami from London in 2009, and my mom, a serious newspaper clipper then and now, she brought me a Miami Herald article with Patrick Farrell's Pulitzer Prize-winning photos. And so I did what I'd spent the last year doing, and I called him and asked him if I could interview him. We met at Starbucks in Hollywood later that day, and at the end of the interview, when he asked if I would share some of my own photos, I reluctantly did. And at the time, the Miami Herald was downsizing, and Pat did the very reasonable thing. He advised me against a career in photojournalism, but still, for whatever fortuitous reason, he generously offered to introduce me to the director of photography, then Roman Laskowski at the Herald. And long story, a bit shorter, it was with that introduction that I started freelancing for the Herald as a photographer and also as a picture desk editor. And I've now been a working photographer for more than 13 years. I've sort of felt and Googled and read and podcasted and really experimented my way through up to this point. And while my work and my life through the years have taken me to all sorts of places, most recently, like most of you, I have been home. And I gave birth to my second daughter about a month into the pandemic, and inspired by a number of online print sales that were raising money for COVID-19 relief efforts, I decided to make one. So I reached out to all the Florida-based photographers I could think of, and they in turn reached out to others. And together we ended up raising more than $60,000 for Miami-based nonprofits that were largely supporting women and children. And I want to share some of the photographers and the work that they generously donated to the Sunny Project, which I named after my then newborn daughter, Sunny. So here's an image on the left by Terrence Price and on the right by Anastasia Samoilova. And in the next image, there's a photo by Michelle Lisa Polisana and James Jackman on the right. And the next one on the left is Peggy Nolan, a photo hero of mine, a local hero, and Melanie Metz on the right, and Maggie Stieber on the left, and Monica Usarovich on the right. And now dear friends, Rosemary Cromwell and Adler Guerrier helped, they donated images, but they also helped me to co-curate a second round of sales and an in-person exhibition that, like Marie mentioned, was called Sun Pours Day Long. And these are just a couple of installation images that Rose took of the exhibition in the Design District. And if you're interested, you can view the full list of Florida-based photographers at thesunnyproject.org. So in the middle of the isolation that 2020 brought with it, this project introduced and brought together more than 60 Florida-based photographers who were otherwise working mostly independently and were largely unknown to one another. And I wanted to share this project because it taught me something I didn't know about myself before, which was that I need peers to bounce ideas off of and a professional local community to help accelerate progress in my own work. And it was with the encouragement of some of these new friends that I found the permission to begin making personal work, dealing with my family and my home. And I, for the first time, felt okay sharing some of my life through my photos instead of always portraying the lives of others. And so these next images are all photos that came out of some version of quarantining at home with my family. And in this image, my grandmother's on the right, and she's with her beloved lifelong friend who had just lost her husband, and they didn't let go of one another's hand all afternoon. And the next image is of my grandmother again, this time on the left, with my daughter at the beach, and my grandmother who lives alone. I would spend, I still try to spend as much time as I can with. And we didn't have a pool. So in this next picture, we wanted to teach our daughter to swim. And without a pool, we weren't seeing people. And so we would ride bikes and borrow friends' pools, and they would wave from inside their homes, and it made us feel connected. Mostly though, I was at home, we can show the next picture, with two small girls. And our home really became our world, like it did for most of the world during this time. Fortunately, our bubble was larger than most, with much of my family living nearby and eager to be a part of my daughter's lives. This is a picture of my mother-in-law with Sunny in our backyard, and the next is of my husband Zeke showering with my daughter Lo, and the next of Sunny crying, and then the next of Lo crying, and this happened a lot. And I wanted to share at least one photo taken on this couch. I make a family book each year, and I hadn't realized it during the edit or design process of this book, but only when I had the book in my hands and was flipping through it, I realized that nearly every other picture, sometimes even a handful of images in a row, were all taken at different times throughout the year on this same couch in the main room of our small house. This next picture is of my mother with Lo, and my mom did give me permission to share this image, and another of her in the ocean. And this next one is one of my favorites. It sort of sums up what these couple of years have been. It's just of my girls with their poppy early one morning. And so while most of my recent time has been spent at home, I have also continued working outside. I've documented pregnancy, birth, illness, weddings. I've covered a number of stories and other life events throughout these last couple of years. Ever since Sunny was born, I've also been particularly interested in being around and learning about and documenting sisters. And this is of a little girl about to welcome her baby sister into the world. And in the next maternity, I guess, photo of a pregnant woman, this mother had, for the photo shoot, waxed her belly to make it look extra beautiful and I guess shiny. And in the process, she developed this wild rash all over, and she gave birth the next day. And another image of sisters, and then another of especially connected twin sisters who I love. It wasn't until a few years ago that I found myself being asked time and again to cover stories or things that dealt with the end of life. And still, one of my all-time favorite assignments from a couple of years ago was when I was asked by the husband of a beautiful dying woman to document her life's work. She was a sculptor, and her husband wanted to make a book of her work before she died, and as it was going to be a sort of dying gift to her. And so I set up a studio in their home for a couple of days, and I shot these large-scale sculptures against a white backdrop. And I'd been told I wouldn't meet her. She was in bed and was unlikely to get up again. Her daughters and siblings had flown in to be with her and also to observe the shoot. And during the last few hours of my being there, she came out of her room and she held my hand in between watching me take photos of some of the final pieces, and she cried and she was embraced by her family. And then just before I began packing up, she held onto me and told me that this day had been the best day of her life. And she died a couple of days later. I'm actually still in the process of finalizing the book with her family. And while I don't think this was the first time, I still think of this assignment as when I sort of consciously at least took note of photography's potential to heal and also make us feel recognized and seen and even understood. This is just an outtake I took of the sculptor and her husband. And in hindsight, this commission was the first in what would become a sort of organic and unplanned exploration into matters dealing with the end of life and also with death. And you can switch slides. Thank you. And so a handful of months ago, I received a phone call from my intuitive and hilarious friend, Rhiannon, who lives in St. Pete. And she had just met a woman via Craigslist that she bought a large ceramic tool from, and she befriended in the process. And Rhiannon insisted that I go and document this incredible woman and the work that she was creating. Sandy, the woman who lives in Sarasota, when she learned of her terminal condition and could no longer physically work as a ceramic artist, she began making paper flowers to be a part of her own funeral. And this next image is Sandy with the discontinued book that her husband hunts down from every corner of the world so that she can continue to make these flowers. And this next picture is an image of the entrance to the room in her house where she works and she makes these flowers. It's a really large room. It goes far beyond what you can see there. And the room is covered from floor to ceiling in these hand-built, vibrant and realistic paper flowers. And there are some additional images here that you can scroll through. Sandy with her flowers. So as Marie mentioned, I've documented the Miami Poetry Festival for the last decade. And last year, I began working on a project initiated by Melody Santiago Cummings called Remembrance to Order. And Remembrance to Order is an ongoing collection of poems and photographs that honor just some of the nearly 10,000 Miami-Dade residents who have died as a result of the pandemic. So the way it works is each requester is someone who has lost someone, and they filled out an online form on OMiami's website and shared varying amounts of information and or anecdotes about their lost loved one. And so far, OMiami's commissioned more than 70 of these poems written by local poets who have used the information provided by the requesters to write these profound and extraordinarily beautiful poems in honor of those lost. And I'm now in the process of working with the requesters directly, who have now received their poems, and we're making photographs in honor of their lost loved ones. And the images are then going to be paired with the poems. And I speak with each requester before meeting them, and we talk together about what they would like photographed. And for example, in this image, no, the one before that was up, yeah, thank you, was in honor of the mother of John Bailey. And he told me that he kept an old photograph that he loved of his mother, in which she looked so happy, in a drawer in his painting studio. And so in this case, we made an image of the photograph itself, and the poem that accompanies it is too long to share here, but it's just so beautiful. And it was written by poet Leslie Frazier. The next image is remembering a woman named Dolores Sotomayor Lovo, who was called Titi by her family. And it was requested by her oldest grandchild, Ana Mantica, who pictured here is holding her baby cousin, Titi's 10th grandchild, who was born just a couple of weeks after Titi died. And we took this photo and others outside of Titi's favorite ice cream shop, Whip and Dip in the Grove. And this last image was made to honor Larry Isserson, who, and it was requested by his daughter. And Larry, among many other things, was a painter. And these are the shorts that he always painted in. And there's a heart-shaped hole in the left thigh of the shorts where his granddaughter made a patch that she affixed to her wedding dress soon after he died. So Remembrance to Order is a project that permits the recognition of loss, something that over the last couple of years has been difficult to achieve. And few of the requesters were able to attend a funeral for their loved one in person, or be with their loved ones during their passing, or grieve among their family or friends. And so it's the hope of the project that a larger collection of these poems and photographs will provide some sense of healing to those who requested them, as well as to those who come across the project and can relate to their loss. And so I'm going to end my presentation with that. And thank you so much for being here and listening. And thank you again, Marie and Anita and Pam, for the invitation to speak today. Anita is now going to field any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gesi. That was a really amazing presentation and such a personal look into your work. So we thank you, and the audience thanks you. It always takes the audience a bit to get warmed up, so I'll give them a moment to ask some questions and put them in the chat, and ask you a question from me, which is in photographing and documenting you know, some can be sad times or happy times and grief. Do you have like any best practices on how you approach people as you're photographing them? I think it's just such an interesting subject, and it has to be very delicate work. Like, how do you go into each day that you know is going to be filled with documenting somebody who might be passing, like the woman you showed with her husband?
So that's such a good question. And I just recently became a hospice volunteer. to learn, to actually learn, like, proven practices for being with people in that stage. And I guess up until a couple of months ago, I sort of just approached being with people who were either grieving or sick the same way that I would approach like most other assignments. And that's to try to, as much as I can, I don't know, be there with them and like really try to be there with them. Like, it's hard because I have this camera in front of me, right? But I try as much as I can to not feel like I have this giant camera. And so, yeah, I'm learning. Yeah, I have a hospice training session again on this coming Monday. So
amazing. Yeah, I mean, that certainly seems like the place to learn. And I think the two would be paired well together. That's really interesting. Thank you. Another question, have you always been interested in photography, or did you practice any other art forms in addition to photography in your early art making days?
Yeah, I always loved photography. I mean, my grandfather always took photos, and then my mother always took photos sort of until I started taking photos. I didn't know that I was a photographer, but I had like two people early on tell me, like when I would just take pictures, that like, you're a photographer. If you want to be a photographer, you can be a photographer. I mean, I've always loved, like, I'm not a good painter, but I love painting. Like I love doing things with my hands. I worked in a wood shop at one point. Like, I like doing creative things, I guess.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question from Chantal. They ask, what was the biggest lesson from being involved in such a powerful project? I love your work. You are an amazing person.
Thank you, Chantal. I think she's referring to the Remembrance to Order project.
Yeah, I think so.
It's so early and it's in the process of the project. I think I have like a lot more to learn from it. Mostly I have things to learn from it. But I think the best part about it so far has just been being able to like provide a little bit of like, for the people, the requesters, going like when I arrive at their house, it's kind of like they weren't able to get an obituary in the paper or like have like any real acknowledgement of their loss. And so when I arrive, it kind of feels like for them, it's like, oh, like this is they want to tell me about their person and I want to listen. And it's like, maybe then it can be shared with like to a larger audience. And like that part of it, I think, is one of the more exciting parts. Yeah.
Right.
I'm still learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. How do you balance work and creative work while having children and a family to take care of? It might seem like it.
Yeah. My kids go to like a daycare, which helps. But it's just challenging. It's like constantly balancing, trying to balance, failing, trying again. It's not, I'm not that great at it, but it's an ongoing challenge.
You seem like you're doing a great job. Let's see. Barbara on Facebook asks, will your photography collection be displayed anywhere digitally or locally? And I guess that kind of leads into my next question of like, what's the next thing you're looking forward to, your work or others?
Sure. So I really am excited about continuing on with this Remembrance to Order project with Miami. And I don't know exactly what shape the product will take, whether it will be an exhibition or a book or just like a collection online or what it will be. But I look forward to seeing it like in its entirety with these poems. I mean, the poems are like so much more. I mean, there's something to say about like a cross-disciplinary like project where the poems are paired with the images. It kind of like, I mean, in my opinion, the poems are far more profound, but I think together it kind of like strips the medium away and just like creates this feeling like it doesn't matter anymore. what the medium is. It's like what the effect is. And yeah, I want that in this project. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see, it looks like we have another question from Nugent Smith. How do you personally manage absorption of the emotional states related of grief that might be passed on from those who you spend time with and photograph? I can read that again if it was jumbled. Sorry.
I think maybe I understood. Maybe not. I think the photos help to process, because when I take them back home and I work with them, it gives me time to absorb and think and be with them. And like almost always I realize like I should have done things differently or said something differently, but it, it's part of the process. Yeah, sometimes it's a lot. Like I have shot, like you've said, I've documented 200 weddings and I've definitely cried at every single one of them. I'd like to feel things. So it's not something that I fear. I fear plenty of things, but that isn't one of them.
Right. That's so funny. That was what I was wondering personally, secretly, because I'm a super wedding crier. And I was wondering like how you could document so many, like I'd cry at everyone if it were up to me. Yeah, especially happy things. So that's amazing to hear. Well, Gesi, I just wanted to really sincerely thank you for sharing all of your work and practice with us. We certainly look forward to following it wherever you go and wherever it takes you. And Pam and the whole audience here really, really appreciate your work. So keep it up. And thank you so much again for your time. It was amazing spending time with you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Bye.